still live on suburban streets, where the planes fly low and food is cheap. All my friends are gone overseas, now everyone's left except me. It's gonna be Vietnam, Morgan's in Paddington. Harry settled down for 4-letter reasons. Edith moved to Easton Park, Chris to Alexandria. Aiden's gone around the world for a 4-letter reason. Well, I can't afford these Sydney streets. Now the land costs more and the rent is steep. All my friends grow up and leave.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. Today's panel is when A&R meets marketing, and as you can see from the short little video, we have an amazing array of A&R and marketing guests here with some of the biggest names in the industry on their roster. So it would be amiss if I didn't showcase some of those artists for you. Today we're just going to explore some ways in which their roles within the labels are working together to pave the way for their artists to cut through and also to shape the future of the industry to come. So hopefully we're going to find out how their roles are finding new artists, engaging new audiences, and how the artists that they're working to add to their rosters have the potential to be signed, and how they're working together to shape the musical landscape. So I think just to start the panel, the first question is going to be, within each of the labels that you're with, how closely are the A&R and marketing teams actually working for you? So Chris, do you want to take that?
Yeah, there's not really much of a division at Secretly Group with our labels. A&R work really, we do have marketing directors, but they, the team, I guess when projects are being built, they're seamless. So, yeah, I think that the best A&R, I think, are thinking about marketing constantly and how to project and present artists. But yeah, we don't really have any distinction. No
segmentation.
No.
Is that the same for you too, John?
Yeah, it's pretty much, it's really one-stop shop, we're all working really, really close together, and when you go out and sign a band, part of the responsibility in the signing process is really to have a vision for where the artist is going to go, where you see it going year 1, year 2, record 3, so, and part of that is, developing a marketing campaign as you're, in the signing process, so it's all just under one umbrella for us.
And that's a big part of identifying the type of artist you wish to sign, is about that complete package, is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. And Alex, from a marketing perspective, how closely are you working with your A&R team over at Due Process?
Yeah, pretty much as the guys have said, I head up marketing and we have 3 A&R people in our team. And we're constantly communicating, throughout like the pre-signing process, and then as soon as, we have artists that are on board, we're basically, I'm in conversations about where things are going. I think now that, things happen really quickly now, and often by the time we even sign a record label, artists have already started marketing themselves. They've got Facebook, they've got Instagram, they might have had something on SoundCloud, or even here, you might get picked up on Triple J, and things like that happen really fast before you even have, the rest of your material ready to go. So it's really important for us to just be constantly, talking with our team and managing the kind of external factors as well as, what's sort of to come. And, as these guys have said, the vision, I guess.
And Imran, taking that marketing philosophy, when you're looking to sign a new artist, how much of their own marketing and brand presence and profile before you come on board is so important to that signing process?
I remember having a conversation about this with someone at Excel, and we were talking about how I think 10, maybe 15 years ago, what you had to do as a new artist was really simple. You pretty much had to just maybe make some demos, maybe play a show, maybe just like meet some people, really simple stuff. Whereas now, the number of decisions you have to make before you launch your career or start in the early part of your career is kind of insane, from hiring an online person potentially to like how you position yourself socially and, you know, your interactions with various platforms. So I don't judge, well, actually I do judge those decisions fairly harshly, but I don't, you know, like I think I definitely look at it as a new artist now. I think you have so many more decisions to make. But I think they're all very telling ones. Yeah, so how I look at that phase of someone's career is really, really, I don't, if they've, the music's obviously the premier thing, but I think it shows if an artist can make good decisions, the point I want to make is, an artist is defined throughout their career by the strength of the decisions they want to make. And if they made really good ones in everything early days, especially this marketing side of things, then I think that's really important. And then if they've made bad ones, that's also important.
Learn by your mistakes.
Yeah.
And Emmy, for you as well?
Yeah, I think being very choosy and signing very few things based on the strength of the songwriting and the strength of the artist's own personal vision carries it very far, and allowing the music to speak for itself and really bringing the songwriting and the lyrics and the story behind the band to life through marketing. That's kind of our primary job, I think, and focus, and not so much how many followers they have or what have you, but more what's this person's message? What are they trying to say?
So for you and how you work with your marketing team, it's really about that control on that craft and that art and that song. And so how you work through the process of that release, are you within your team structure working on every single aspect? So it's never just that hit that leaves the A&R desk. It's
Right.
pretty much you're holding the hand the whole way through?
Yes, it's only 4 of us. We operate within Atlantic, but we're kind of self-contained. So the 4 of us all have our hand on every part of it, I would say. But yeah, it's definitely a lot of times, you know, a band will come in and for them the song comes out, the video comes out, and it's what else can we give to you? What other resources can we provide? Can we make cartoons about your lyrics and incorporate them into Spotify? It's our job to be creative and lend to their own creativity, I think.
And Jeremy, yourself, how your structure is working A&R and marketing?
Yeah, to that point, I think we've started to talk and touch on what I think is incredibly important. As Imran said, song is always going to be the priority, and as Emmy started to say, the lyrics, I find myself paying more attention to than ever, you know, as far as defining the personality and the connection that you're going to enable with an audience. So starting there, and then really, you know, as part of the signing decision-making process, knowing if that artist does have a really focused vision on how they want to present themselves, on how they want to, you know, have their videos look and have their logo and so forth, I think that really all sort of functions in this congruency. So whereas it starts at the music as the priority and the very core of you know, if you feel like it can work, you've got to know that artist and the band are themselves, and hopefully their team too, because management, as I'm sure we'll talk about, become very important in our jobs, that there's a vision there and one that you believe in and are in line with. I think nothing could be more destructive than signing something because you think the songs are great, but having a completely different idea on how you wanted to market it. So those things need to be in line. And then, you know, I think as we had all started to say together, the division between a marketing and an A&R it's really seamless, as Chris said. You know,
Can I just say one thing as well, which I think I hope most people here would agree with, because I was very harsh on the marketing decisions. That some people, some artists are so, and I think this applies only to social media really, but some artists are so artistic and so visionary and so blessed in that respect, they might be terrible at social media, and in which case they get a massive pass. But I think we'll probably come onto this later on, but there's definitely a group of individuals or talented individuals like that who exist, and the way I think that some modern A&R is done precludes those people, but I think that only makes those people more kind of interesting.
And special in their own right.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I work with J. Paul, like Excel. He's not very good at social media, but he's really great at everything else. So that doesn't mean that doesn't preclude him from being signed or anything like that. But anyway, sorry.
No, it's good. In terms of what you're saying before about all things considered for signing, are there any great examples of artists that you've signed recently and opening to the panel where that buzz hasn't yet occurred? Because a lot of the time we're so accessible to, the charts of Shazam and the streams and the playlists of Spotify, and it'd be great to know if the consideration for signing, it needs that buzz factor, or how exciting it is to find that artist without that buzz factor occurring at all, and how hard is it today? Is it making the deals more expensive for you all? Is it making it harder to sign because everyone, is looking at the same kind of data and same kind of stats? Chris, do you want to kick off?
I mean, it's so fun when you get to find something that you love that isn't kind of on the radar of other people yet. It's just this thing that you get to, that you get to be a part of and help mold and introduce. Like we just enjoyed we've been enjoying it this year with Whitney, band from Chicago, and they had a previous band that they were a part of that we were fans of, but the new sound in their band it didn't sound anything like what they'd done before, and so the whole process feels new and exciting and interesting, and but it is tougher now, because we're all hearing music, on the same internet, so.
And does that go back to kind of the classic days of just getting out there and infiltrating your scouts and your influencers and the people that you trust to bring that new and emerging kind of talent to you at first rehearsal?
Yeah, the best stuff usually comes from, a friend of a friend and just word of mouth in that way. And so, yeah.
Same for you, John, as well, in terms of how you're looking at artists that have already got that buzz factor that's already billowing and occurring versus those that are unknown and you've just snapped them up?
Yeah, well, I think it's really the most, for me personally, for my staff, it's really so fulfilling and rewarding to kind of, get into find something really early before it's all heated up or overcooked and there's too much noise or competition. That's really when you can get in early, make the record with a young artist, push it out, promote it, and it really connects is a beautiful thing. And so like Margaret Glaspie, for example, is one artist in particular where we kind of, she was making bedroom demos. There wasn't a huge buzz. She had a self-released EP, and she sent us some bedroom demos, and absolutely just floored us. It was like Elliott Smith and all these different influences, and we invited her into the office, and we've had a really wonderful campaign with her, and that was something we didn't have to fight over, or, outbid other labels and talk to lawyers. It was really natural, and we clicked, and so that's one example really of we got in really early, and that's really fulfilling for me. Yeah.
Imran, would that be the same, going back to your point before about, looking at all those things considered and that buzz occurring? How are you navigating that within Excel for buzz bands and signing buzz bands?
I think there's room for both within any label. There's definitely been instances recently of things we signed that people didn't know about. We signed two French-Cuban performers called eBay, who nobody really knew about before we'd signed them, and they did well. And I recently signed like 4 Danish kids called Liss, who people didn't really know about before we started working with them. Then equally we signed Jungle and K Tronada as a label, and everybody kind of knew about them before we had signed them. So I think there's definitely room for both. I guess is one thing, this doesn't again preclude anyone from being signed, but one thing I found with stuff that's signed that no one knows about is that I think we're really in an era of discovery. And I think when you sign stuff that people have never heard of, I think there's always been a natural suspicion of record labels, rightly, but I think people are even more sussed now, and it brings more challenges in terms of launching a brand new career of someone that people haven't heard of, because everybody in this room now is really good at finding new music. Like the man on the street is really good at finding new music. Like everybody considers themselves like at the forefront of discovery. And I think if you don't have media or certain partners discovering an act before a label launches them, I think that brings challenges. Ultimately, it doesn't matter if the record's great, but it does mean that people are a bit like, no one wants to be told what's new and good. People want to feel like they figured it out themselves these days. Whereas I think a few years ago, I think we lived in a world a bit more where like the NME would tell everybody what was good, and people would kind of get on board with that. And I don't necessarily think that's the case anymore. Not just the NME, because I used to work there, but yeah, you know, like other things like radio and stuff as well. But so yeah, a bit of both, I would say.
So with the music industry awash with all of this big data, Emmy, how are you navigating the digital landscape to kind of cut through to find out what you feel is buzzing and what you think is right for the label? Where are you looking and how are you finding it?
Well, I mean, I'm fortunate to work at a label where we don't really go by stats. It's less important at Canvasback than maybe Atlantic on a whole, just because that's their business model and we have ours. But I mean, I think we really, or at least the way I go about things is just knowing that, you know, the greatest bands ever don't have hits on their first record, and maybe even their second, and that if you have faith and you trust your gut and you know they're going to write better and better songs and grow, that's the most kind of important mindset I try to keep. Again, it's what label you work at and where your mentorship is coming from, and if people, you know, trust your gut like they would trust their own, or so yeah, I'm fortunate where I don't really have to go by Spotify stats, but I don't think that that's the wrong way to do it by any means. It's just sometimes challenging, I think, if something is buzzing, to keep up the buzz and to write better songs after you've already had a smash hit as your debut. So that's a challenge as well. Buzz doesn't necessarily mean great.
Yeah.
It's about the star and the person and the story, and are they exceptional, I think.
And I suppose that ties back into kind of the marketing side with you, Alex, perfectly. So once that instinct and that signing occurs, and to kind of continue to create that story and to create that level of potential success on the play, the streams, etc., how do you then work with data yourself to try and make sure that you carry that through, understand what's reacting, what's not reacting, potentially go back to A&R and talk about those songs before we move forward in the marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, I'm always looking at things like, you know, I guess once we put a track out, you can see in real time how people are reacting to it. That's the thing, right? So, you know, Shazam, Spotify streams, all those kind of stats. But I think a lot of it, for me, is still a lot about instinct and you know, looking through what people are commenting on Facebook and just getting a general feeling about it, really. Like, are you seeing people talk about it and not just in one place? You know, is it just like music industry people talking about it, or are you seeing it pop up in other areas? So yeah, I think, yeah, definitely, like, you need to think of a lot in marketing about, you know, we've got KPIs and return on investment and all of those kind of things. So of course we're always sort of referring to stats and data, but yeah, again, I don't know that it's not everything. I think a lot.
Yeah,
of
and I
it's
think the
still
calibre of labels here on the panel today probably have that perfect balance of head and heart, and very much wear their heart on the sleeve. But, you know, looking at some of the bigger labels that are moving through the songs and song process, Jeremy, do you think that there could be a potential danger of A&R by numbers coming through the industry?
Well, again, I think it depends on the company you work for. You know, I really respect data, but every act that I've signed that's been successful has been having has started from below sea level, so to speak. So to that end, I think if you're working at a company where you need fast results, you have to be paying attention to research, and you have to be bidding on acts that have a hot song. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think the best labels, who are faced with that challenge are going to, look to partition the roster to do development alongside that and keep those things separately. And hopefully, as everything does in the past, have the successes, the frontline successes on some of maybe the more research-driven stories feed the development and offer that longer runway, because it is very important. Not the speed at which you succeed is often the speed at which you're forgotten or you fail. So the longer that a time takes, and as Emron said, to the point that no one wants to be told their favorite music, and especially not by their moms or their aunts or uncles. They don't. I think they want to be told, some people, but by the right messenger. So getting onto the radio right away is the surefire way to not be told by the right messenger. That kind of thing doesn't necessarily breed a very concrete fan base. It's a kind of very fleeting thing, and we see that all the time. You have acts that achieve big single sales success and sometimes album sales success and radio success, of course, but don't really sell tickets, and they're faced with the same challenge, more or less starting from zero on the next album, if they haven't taken that longer path of developing, over several years and sometimes several albums. So to the question, I respect research. I think it's important to look at. It certainly isn't everything. I think in this age too, we're sort of starting to see a lot of false positives, a lot of artists who, are maybe even selling a lot of singles, but the music at the core isn't excellent. And that kind of thing is a little bit dangerous with companies who job in a lot of ways are to support culture, strictly investing in artists, quote unquote, who are maybe better marketers than they are artists, so.
I was watching the Stones Throw conversation before this, and no one would ever have got signed to that label by the people who run that label if they had gone down that road. But then again, don't get me wrong, it would make my life a whole lot easier if there was a system that worked. It would be fucking great. But unfortunately, it doesn't. There's no money ball for great music and great artists. It doesn't exist. But
a lot of our job is trying to anticipate an itch the public, doesn't yet know they have, I think. Looking at lanes and looking at what other labels are doing to see what's going to market, what isn't there, what could be exciting, what the public we feel might need. I mean, that's a lot of how I've looked at taking signings as well. It's trying to necessarily see where something new could fit in and hopefully have that public, sort of feel like they need it and find it on their own or find it through the right channel.
So once the others sign and the career and the development and the vision's kind of set, do you feel as though that the demand for more and more music with the rise of digital consumption is adding a lot more pressure back on the teams within the labels to keeping up with the Joneses and keep delivering all of this content for all the social platforms? How are you dealing with that demand within each of the labels? Chris, if you want to start.
Yeah, I think every campaign is different. But yeah, I think we've traditionally approached things from a very the full length as novel, and the full length is what we base everything around. And I think that we're wanting to kind of get out of that pattern 100% of the time now, and try messing with kind of more not so much album focused. Release patterns, and it really depends on the act, though. I think having a nice blend and mixing it up, but it's a lot of work to be a band, and to be on the road all the time and to be writing. You look back at the careers of people like Elton John or Creedence Clearwater Revival or whatever, who were cranking out 2 records a year for 6 years, and and touring and having massive hits and doing tons of press, and it's incredible. And then trying to get a couple extra songs from an artist while they're on the road, and it's hard. you know, and so it's a lot of pressure, but it's also, you know, I think there's also, like, because of the instant feedback, it can be stimulating for, you know, for the whole team, including the artist, and so, you know, I don't think it's, you know, it's not at a tipping point, but I do think it's something that we want to kind of change up more.
Is that the same for you too, John?
I think for some artist campaigns, like less is more works, actually, where there's just, you know, tremendous amount of mystique, or, you know, where there's not too much information available for the artist, and that way when people go out and see the shows, it's kind of a different sensation. There's mystery, and, you know, it's a different sort of connection, because, you know, their socials are not polluted with too much content or Instagram clips or whatnot. So it is very case by case. I mean, you know, our philosophy at ATO is a very, you know, it's the long game with every campaign. It's 18 months of commitment, ground up, top down, tour marketing, and it is, we like to come with all of our campaigns with the full portfolio of assets. If we're working 3 singles, we want to have 3 videos. And we do actually, we love when our artists are really spectacular at putting compelling content together and cool Instagram clips. And we do packaging clips to kind of show off the vinyl and colored vinyl, whatnot. And so it's really just, I think, like what Chris was saying, it's super case by case. With the nice thing is every campaign that we do is customized to the needs of the artist, and we're flexible, and we can move as fast as the artist wants, as needed, or slow. If we have heated radio, you know, we'll go a little deeper on the content creation. So, yeah, I think so. Everything works. Everything can coexist. I don't know if I'm making. Is that a
definitely.
good answer? Okay.
And I think that's a really great kind of chance to throw to you, Alex, in terms of you know, that really considered strategic approach on you've been delivered an album and a body of work, be it the videos, the press shots, you know, those assets that formulate a campaign. So how do you work with your team and the label to kind of control the amount of push back into A&R to develop more content for that, so that the artist can kind of focus on what they're doing, which would potentially be live or potentially, you know, writing more? What are you doing within your role just to kind of ease that pressure a little bit around that content need?
I ask for more of it all the time. I mean, firstly, with things like press shots and videos, that's actually something that I help spearhead for our team. You know, those tools are creative aids to the music, but they're marketing tools. You know, they're forming your brand and you know, creating your identity, and that's something that I think, you know, someone who's thinking outward needs to have a bit of an input in. So I guess part of that is sort of I assist with that. Content is just like kind of what you guys have been saying. It's just case by case. Different things work for different artists, but you know, there's so much crap out there. Just not just music, but like just so much stuff. And the way that we're seeing that you get the algorithm working and you're seeing it in your feeds is when the content is engaging, and that's going to be different for everyone, you know, like, you know, with one of our artists, Hearts, he's a guitarist, he's a total musician, you know, his fans are really interested in like the behind the scenes stuff and like how he actually creates the music. And then someone like, Rat, who's this amazing MC that we work through on our other label, Create Control. She's 16 years old. She's the best personality, super kitschy, and you know, for her, like what she does is she sends photos of her dogs to her fans, you know, like, and that really works. People are like, holy shit, this is the best thing ever. She didn't, you know, so it's. I think, you know, I do think good content is required in most cases, but it's just about managing what's right for your audience, yeah.
And I think probably the audience, there's a lot of musicians in here and self-managed artists as well. So in terms of what you do for a label, what are some of the go-to marketing tools that they can potentially leverage to kind of cut through and get their songs out there? Are we still, you know, heavily reliant on the Spotify's, the socials, the antisocial behaviour that's happening out there, and movement to messaging? Like what would your advice be to some of those artists on how to kind of cut through?
I think just have a really clear idea of who you are and have a tone of voice. So when you are doing the social stuff, it's something that, you know, I can make an emotional connection, or whoever can make an emotional connection. I think that's at the start of it. All the other stuff, like, like social profiling is obviously really important. Speaking to your fans, you know, getting news out there. Streaming is probably something that we consider as, you know, on par with radio now locally. Radio still has a massive part. You know, Triple J here, obviously very dominant if you're a young group, and that's a big part of our plans. But getting our streaming partners involved and looking at playlisting and curators and finding, you know, new ways to get it out there and encourage that discovery process, really, that everyone's kind of been talking about. I think those are sort of the kind of key things that we're sort of looking at.
Mm. And Imran, do you agree with that, where those platforms is the power of where they're breaking music these days, through streaming?
I think it's a combination of that and the way that things have always been done. Radio is still really important, press is still really important. I definitely agree with Alex and the guys about everything's on a case-by-case basis. One thing I have noticed more broadly, I think, and I think as a fan of music, this is kind of good, is that, do you remember like when an album was going to be out in 3 months' time, you had one song to survive that 3 months with? Now it feels like you get a lot more. And I think that's because I think people's attention spans, I think as you were saying, like are competing with, you know, people are getting hyped about the new Bon Iver album, but they're also getting hyped about Star Wars Rogue One. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like, so you've got a bit of a battle on for attention, so.
Well, the way you know, our phones are our life now, and on your phone you can, there's the entire history of cinema. Yeah. There's news, there's politics, there's sports, there's music. You know, you're not just competing with contemporary music, but you know, the history of music you can have at your fingertips. There's pornography, there's literature, there's podcasts, there's comedy. We're in a golden age of comedy, and you know, it's like there's so much shit. Yeah. Your songs are competing.
So much information.
Yeah, and I think in music we feel like, I think sometimes when you put a 10-track album out, having only gone into it with 1 or 2 tracks, I think sometimes it feels a bit like, oh, the other 8 tracks didn't get as much attention as maybe they would have got if maybe you had, like, you know, put things out a bit more, spaced them out a little bit more. But yeah, there's a lot of competition for stuff. I think like the way the digital works now is that I think we're going to see more campaigns where artists, so probably like in terms of probably like a on the ground advice thing is probably if you've got an EP ready to go, or I think the way some people really effectively do it on SoundCloud is don't put up 8 tracks at the same time. Like, you know, build an audience, put up 1, and then like 1 3 weeks later, and then you can keep doing that. And then eventually when you come back, there's a body of work that has, you know, looks really impressive, and, you know, you've built an audience in some way, or you've started to build one anyway.
Taking to the end of the extreme with some of the powerhouses on your label, do you feel as though windowing releases and that control of exclusivities allow some of the fans to connect with a whole album at a particular point in time? Do you think it's streamlining, or do you think it's more of that chart sales driven from a label perspective that's kind of driving these big kind of, you know, your Kanye for titles and, you know, your Frank Ocean for Apples, or your
I get
Adele?
nervous talking about windowing. But I would say, probably because I don't completely understand it myself, I would say there's one group of people who can do that, and then there's everyone else who can't really do that. And those group of people, there's always been like this cabal of really huge artists at the top of music who can kind of do what they want, and then everyone else has to abide by a certain, I don't know, like there's one rule for them. There's always been one rule for Madonna and one rule for kind of 99.9% of everyone else. And also, I think, I mean, I can't give a definitive answer to that because I think it's moving and changing all the time. And I think what worked 3 months ago might not work tomorrow. But, I mean, the Frank Ocean album's sick, so.
Frank Ocean album's amazing, but I think the windowing thing is incredibly unhealthy. You know, I think that's a prime example. I had to re-sign up for Apple Music to listen to it because I wanted to. Yeah. But these are short-sighted decisions being made on management and a large competition between 2 very, very big billion-dollar companies that are, I think, really hindering discovery, and the amount of people who don't really know the Frank Ocean album's out, you know, who are active and want to listen to it are I have to assume a lot, you know, and you know, that type of thing. I think, you know, every artist I certainly have ever worked with and spoke to wants nothing more than everyone to hear their music. So windowing these things, I think, is nothing more than sort of feeding a very, very public corporate feud. And I don't think it's healthy. You know, I think there's business strategy involved with it, but as a pure outlet and for getting music out, I really don't agree.
I guess the funny thing about that is my personal opinion is, I wouldn't probably word it as strongly as that, but my personal opinion is exclusives. That's never really been my personal position, exclusivity in music. I think it should be catch-all. But I guess with all the people that we work with, so far it's kind of been an artist by artist decision, right? Some artists want to do things a certain way, other artists don't want to do it another way. You kind of have to, I know Bon Iver has his opinions about Apple in the past and stuff, and like very publicly voiced, and like, you know, they are what they are, they're their personal decisions. I had a friend, this isn't my opinion, but a friend offered me a very different perspective on this, which was, no one complains when you have to go to Netflix to watch Narcos. People figure out that you can only watch Narcos or like Making a Murder on Netflix, and you can't watch it on YouTube, and you can't watch it on whatever. I know it's like a different thing, but I don't know, it's just an interesting time where people are working that stuff out. I don't know the answers, but...
Yeah, no, and to that point, you're entirely right. HBO versus Netflix, and there's no argument and no sort of disgruntlement with that end. But I think, you know, I can't help but think in music where you're fighting for attention and volume of release that, you know, it's important to be everywhere at once. And
yeah, my personal opinion is I totally agree with you. I guess sometimes artists feel totally differently, and like, say like an artist came up through SoundCloud, they might really just want to like launch something on SoundCloud because that's where their whole audience is.
I think too,
and then you kind of have to respect that, right?
You also, though, let's not kid ourselves, you lose control. These exclusivities, you know, are then being ripped really quickly, you know, to put on YouTube. So, you know, there's no sort of making it secret. You're just making it, you're losing the control.
Yeah, they're not creative decisions that are driving the big high-profile windowing we're talking about.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Is it purely sales? Like, is that what?
It's purely the advance.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, 100%.
I mean, the windowing, really, in the music business, a lot of it is driven by the agenda of the big platforms,
Yeah.
you know, whether it's Spotify or Apple. It's just like what you were saying. I had to get the Frank record, I had to sign up
Join.
for Apple. So it's their agenda. I do think the movie business is interesting. They're windowing. You know, first couple weeks, you have to go to an art house cinema, pay full rate, box office, go enjoy the cinema experience, chill out, you know, see a film. And then you have to wait, you know, 3 months, then it pops up on iTunes, and then, you know, a week later, Amazon, and then, you know, 3 months after that, Netflix. And I think that's an interesting model that perhaps the music business can look at, you know, as subscription continues to grow. So...
I suppose we shouldn't talk about windowing forever because we'll
No,
lose
yeah.
everyone. But I suppose the worst thing about windowing, I think, is the fact that record stores always at the end of that chain. And that's terrible because like people always forget now. Not they don't forget, but like imagine working in a record store. You've been selling a certain person's artist's records for like 7 years, and now you have to wait like 4 months to like.
That's an eternity.
Yeah, like it's like.
By the time
I
Frank
think that's
Ocean,
really-
like by the time you can get Blonde on vinyl,
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be old.
Interestingly, you can't get Channel Orange on vinyl, but someone's bootlegged it and sold about 50,000 copies of it in the
Wow.
UK.
That's great.
True.
Wow.
Not me. Not me.
Emmy, I'm just going to steer more into kind of the shift in the music industry, and I think that what we're discussing as a whole collectively, and I've had a lot of conversations over the last couple of days about the new ways of making money, the fragmentation of the revenue channels coming through the industry. How has this shift really impacted your business and how the deals that you're making and what you're looking for to sign artists and to market artists, especially when brand deals are coming into play and things like that and licensing?
Well, it totally depends on the label. If it's a 360 thing, if touring revenue is part of the deal, if merch revenue is part of the deal. also just being patient and allowing artists plenty of time to tour and make their own money from record sales before you collect on things. Of course, I mean, without the physical record sales, all of that is cut, but I'm not sure if I can say as much as maybe some other people can about finances and.
Especially from a marketing perspective, Alex, the brand conversation's been coming up a lot more. How much are you working with your artists about when it's the right time to potentially partner, and is this a reasonable level of revenue coming through for the artist to sustain their career?
I guess it, again, just depends on the act and, you know, what their image is and who that kind of appeals to. I don't think I think it was really like standoffish, you know, historically people just didn't really want to be associated with doing that stuff, but, you know, the way that brands are doing things now, it's all content creation and placing it with, you know, cool media partners so that it kind of makes it okay. And for me, if that's in line with the artist brand, then, you know, I think that's a really good thing, you know. Yeah.
And John, is that the same for you, overseeing kind of your whole team, how much impact or conversation are you having within your label about brand partnerships and finding new revenues for the artist and for the business itself?
Sure. Well, let's see here. The you know, the brand partnerships are when the right ones align and when there's a natural fit with the artist and they're excited, it's great, you know, in terms of you know, helping the album campaign with promotion, like a Levi's tie-in, for example, and they do a great job with that. I do think, you know, there's a couple instances where we have a pretty good merch solution happening in our own web shop, and we'll potentially assert some extra rights maybe for some merchandise, or you know, we're not in the publishing space. So, and then in terms of just the overall budgets, we try to, you know, with our deals, run projections and tighten up the belt, keep it really, really tight. We're not, you know, the days of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on videos is pretty much exotic and foreign to us. We just keep it really, really tight. So, yeah.
You don't have to hire helicopters anymore. You can just use drones.
Drones, yeah. We actually
saved a lot of money for the music business.
We do have a drone in a recent video. It was
do you?
fantastic, yeah.
So you're picking up a drone business right now.
Yeah, saved a lot of money for biz.
Yeah. And Chris, yourself, in terms of, you've got publishing in your group as well, so how's the impact of the shift and the fragmentation of revenue affecting your business and how you're doing business?
I think we look at publishing as a creative endeavor, you know, and to be able to work with songwriters, and so it's not, yeah, you're getting a little bit deeper with, you know, if it's also an artist you work with master side, you're going deeper and looking at things a little more holistically, but it's also, you know, we're not a passive publisher at all. You know, we're very active, and it's more of a, you know, a process that we like to get involved in. You know, we do some joint deals that are master and publishing. They have their separate aspects in the deal, you know, and they have to be worked out, you know, with the artist. But, you know, you try to keep things, you know, our model is, you know, you don't want to spend so much up front that, you know, it makes it really difficult to market the record. And you know, you hope that the projects can break even so that, you know, there's plenty of back end for everybody.
Just to round out the conversation, I just want to shift gear and kind of look a little bit more kind of to the future. And just in respect to each of your companies and labels that you work with, I'd like to know how you see the departments working together in the future, and what does that label structure look like? So where are you investing the time? Where are you investing the money? What is the new look and the new future of the label structure?
That's a good, yeah, I know, you know, like going back to a question you had earlier about data, you know, like I've been thinking a lot about how I really don't feel like we're doing enough with data right now. You know, I think traditionally we've kind of rested on our laurels of being, you know, it's all about the ears, and, you know, and creativity isn't necessarily a numbers game, but we do have more data than we've ever had, you know, and I've been daydreaming about having, you know, like a data wonk, you know, somebody who really can, you know, who both is very organized and, you know, analytical on one end, but also understands the creative process that's involved. And, you know, I don't want to be driven by numbers, but we do have all this data, and, you know, I think that, you know, there's room for that. But in terms of structure, it's a big question, you know. Maybe I'll defer to somebody else on the panel.
I think that's a handball to you.
I think not over-signing. I mean, if it's quality over quantity and you're really putting all your eggs in the baskets that you think are truly exceptional, then that shaves off a lot of extra spending that might not pan out in a couple of years. Or doing shorter term deals, so if, you know, if it's just an EP or a single, or that might be something that's more financially responsible rather than signing a lot of things that you hope pop, I think.
In the future. Jeremy, what about
And to the point of the question, you know, how maybe the new model or the new record label will be in 5-10 years, I think we're starting to see some of this, but I think you're going to have management blended in with the record label responsibilities, as it's already become that, you know, and, you know, a more gross participation on all accounts of that artist's career. I think there's good examples of management companies like Q Prime that are releasing all of their artists' albums on their own. Great friends at a company called Teamwork, who achieved a #1 top 40 song with Lean On, who did that on their own, you know, as the label and management. So you have overlap and a significant amount, and I think as we discussed, the recorded music income maybe shrinking somewhat, you're going to, I think, see more of this model. Like, I really do. I think the next iterations of the larger scale record companies will be sort of full service management companies and operating a bit differently on where the money's participated in. So that's really my opinion. I think we're going to see more of that, more success stories like that. So
I'd like to see some, I agree, the record label of the future is really just an umbrella of music professionals who can handle your management business and offer the artist just really a suite of services. And you can, you know, the professionals who work in the label or that company wears a bunch of different hats, you know. And I do think that, yeah, I feel like, I kind of lost my train of thought, but I do think it's really a one-stop shop where, you know, the artist, it's really built on trust, you know, and the artist wants, you know, just one umbrella to offer the expertise in the different lanes. And I do think ticketing is interesting with the labels putting so much exhaustive investment and time and energy into building the careers and giving these artists tremendous foundations in touring, and sometimes, you know, offering up tour support. I do feel like a merge into ticketing, into some of our offerings would be really interesting. I see that as something that's that could work really well.
Alex?
Yeah, the services thing I really agree with. I mean, I don't want to say, I mean, the word agency is kind of a bit corporate and icky, but it's sort of the kind of thing that I envision, you know, having your one-stop shop for all these different services. You know, we're actually have a number of sister companies through Secret Sounds, touring. We've got a sponsorship agency, a PR company, a digital agency. That's something that we're already a part of, and I kind of just see us sort of evolving within that group and adding more things as they kind of become required to artists.
And finally, what about the future
I mean-
of Excel?
Sorry, say that last bit.
The future of the departments and how the label will be structured?
I mean, that is a really tough question. But I would say, I mean, I think everybody here has answered it really effectively. I guess one thing I would say is, I think being an artist, there's going to be a lot more choice other than just signing to a conventional record label. and I do think record labels are great, but I think there will be a lot more examples of ways that you can do things in a more DIY way, opening up, getting music on the streaming services and various other platforms. It's a great example in the UK of someone I wanted to mention a lot more, but I just remembered that I was going to do that. This UK rapper called Stormzy, who I think is brilliantly at the intersection of A&R and marketing, because he marketed himself brilliantly across every platform imaginable, A&R'd himself, and got it to the point where he had like a top 3 record in the UK. And I think he's a great example of like where things could go for artists if the traditional label route and door is closed to them. I think that will be interesting going forward. I think the traditional record label will still exist, and I still think they'll do an amazing job, but I don't necessarily think that would be the right fit for every artist. So I think there's going to be lots of other options for artists to self-release music and promote and get paid in places they've never been paid for, never been paid from before. So I think it's generally, from an artist perspective, I think it's good.
We've only got a few more minutes, so I just want to throw to the last question before we open up to you all to ask these guys some questions. So just going back to the artists that you're working with, I would love to know personally, as probably the audience would, but with respect to the artists that you are working with, or you potentially have your own, which you won't tell us about anyway, so the ones that you're working with, who should we be watching out for come 2017 and beyond for each of you? Who wants to start?
I'll start. So there's a really exciting artist I signed. It's a woman. Her name is LP, letter L, letter P. Very somewhat comparable to Nancy Sinatra, kind of, and incredible voice. She's an interesting story in that she was dropped from the major label system, and I signed her pretty much right after that, believing in her as a talent. And we put out tracks that you would never consider, in a lot of typical sense, a single. Nothing that you, in America at least, would predict would work at radio. She's American, and it's a good story. I think I may have told a few people on this panel, but I'll tell the audience. But it's great in that it's happening in real time, in that LP had a couple of these songs out that were very slow and vibey, but they caught the attention of an A&R in Greece that thought that it could work in his country, and he got it on national radio there, and roughly 4 weeks after that happened, it became the #1 song on Shazam and iTunes and Airplay in the country, and shined a really big spotlight on that song, on her as an artist, that spread really through all the countries surrounding, a lot to do with the vacationing cycle in Greece. It opened my eyes up to Europe and the sort of information transfer that'll happen with travel. And right now, #1 in Italy, top 10 in France, top 50 in Germany, and looking very good in the Nordics, and hopefully soon to come here, UK, and then back home to the US.
Awesome.
So keep an eye out. LP, the song is called Lost on You.
Lost on You. Yep. Amy?
We just signed a British band called Blind Evan. They're on Transgressive in the UK, and their record, they'll come out next year. It's amazing. Really, really good.
I'm working with, I mentioned before, a Danish band called Liss, who have a great song called Sorry that people should check out on their preferred streaming service of choice. And they're going to have a record out next year, which I'm excited about.
TK Midza, for me, she's an Australian artist. Probably a lot of people here already know her. We're putting out her debut record at the end of October. Just put out the first song last week. It has Killer Mike from Run the Jewels on it. A lot of international activity happening around her. Really, really exciting. Yeah.
I'll name a few bands I'm excited about on our roster for next year. I mean, first off, we're in Australia, so we handle King Gizzard in the States, and they are so poised, and there's such energy around that band. So we're really excited. Those guys are going to give us a new record for next year, so we're really pumped on that. We have a new extraordinary talent. His name is Nick Hakim, and he just has one EP out, and we're finishing up his album now. He's kind of, I would say, like a psychedelic neo-soul guy, huge voice. It's a little bit of a James Blake meets Devendra Banhart thing. It's super cool, and we're really stoked on him, and I think you'll hear from him. And then obviously we have some wonderful continuation stuff going on their second LP, and we've really been developing these guys big time. So hooray for the Riff Raff as a new album, as does Benjamin Booker for next year, and shameless self-promotion, but I had to call those albums out, yeah.
That's the question, so it's great. I'm
Yeah,
just writing notes
yeah,
down.
I'm really excited about Gordy from Sydney, who's playing tonight. There's going to be a full length next year, which I'm really excited about. The EP came out a couple months ago outside of Australia, and I'm in love. So
So good. So we've got 2 minutes. Can't really see anyone, but does anyone have any questions? No.
Yes, we win.
Does that mean that we covered everything?
You don't, you know, if you have
I
a
don't know if
question.
anyone on the floor can help. No?
Okay.
Hey.
Going back to the like the future of the label, I was having a chat to the future of the label. I was having a chat with some friends yesterday talking about, well, you mentioned Netflix with the exclusivity. Do you see like how long before there's a Spotify Originals album? You know what I mean? Like how long before Apple Music is actually not just licensing this music, but they're making it? Like, do you see that as an eventuality?
Really going to be depending on that artist and the deal they're going to cut for that, and something like Spotify, you know, it's entered my mind, you know, as far as not only potentially money that could be offered, but also, you know, a guaranteed amount of promo. So it's a tough question, but I would caution doing those deals. Like, you know, I think you're putting a lot of eggs in maybe a very fleeting basket. You know, MySpace isn't here anymore. You know, like that type of thing, like, you know, very, very well could come out from under it and make room for something that is very different from Apple Music or Spotify. So that's my opinion there. But it's not entirely impossible. And I have thought about those deals being potentially made. I had thought, in truth, that in a lot of ways it is what already Apple's doing, but just you're saying more for perpetuity, so not impossible. It's interesting, and things will get far more aggressive between those two companies, that's for sure. So it's possible.
Yeah, and just to the point of, you know, DIY things and self-releasing music and what a label offers, I think it's important to, when you're within the label, it's not just a bank, really. You have this brain trust of people who have, you know, 50 years, 30 years, 20 years experience, have worked with every kind of artist and released music in every kind of way, and I think that that's a lot of what you're getting from being at a label and knowing that whatever happens, somebody has dealt with this before and you're gonna be fine. And I think with the, you know, Spotify releasing music and things like that, definitely that could happen, and I don't think that's unlikely, but that's
Yeah, the value
what-
is very much within that label, that
Right.
brain's trust.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. I just want to thank the panel. So Chris from Secretly Group, John from ATO, Alex from Due Process, Imran from Excel, Emmy from Canvasback, and also Jeremy from Vagrant. So thanks everyone for coming. Thanks guys.